Welcome to our third installment of the NJ4S Compass Academy. This is our third month running this group for parents, caregivers, educators, professionals, any adult throughout the state of New Jersey, primarily working or living, raising children in Ocean and Monmouth County. My name's Dave Seeger. I'm the director of NJ4S Compass Ocean County. NJ4S is the statewide student support services program launched by the Department of Children and Families of the state of New Jersey in 2023 with the intention to give New Jersey students and caregivers increased and more efficient access to safe spaces and build connections to prevention and mental health resources. Next slide, please. So we're locally known as Compass. Some of you hopefully have been hearing about us in your child's school or in your workplace. NJ4S is the state acronym. We like to go by Compass, so we hope that we become recognizable in the community. And the whole primary focus and intention is to provide prevention for grades K through 12. We do this with a tier system approach. Tier 1 being our universal prevention for grades K through 12, going out to schools and workplaces and community events and doing prevention related to mental health, substance use, bullying, violence prevention. And we do this typically in large group formats, assemblies, parent workshops, staff development. Our tier 2, we get a little deeper and we address students that have been referred in grades 6 through 12 by their school professionals, their guidance counselor, and their principals. Anybody that's identified them as having a particular need, maybe in one of these core areas, that we can go in and do a multi-session program with these students. It's sort of seen as a psychoeducational group process. And then our tier 3 is our mental health component. And these are individual students that have been referred again by school professionals at grades 6 through 12, who may need some intense level of counseling. So we could do assessment and referral. We can also go right to the school and offer a weekly or bi-weekly ongoing counseling for these students. It is time limited. We try to get students linked to the community within 60 to 90 days so they can participate in more longer term services. But we do provide, a high level of clinical counseling and also a level of psychiatry should the student, benefit from psychiatric care. So those are our core services. That's what Compass is designed to do. And in order to access our services, there'll be some contact information at the end. You can reach out to us directly. You can contact your child's school and tell them that you would like your child to be participating in Compass for NJ4S. And they can reach out to us directly. And if you are a professional in the community and you'd like us to come out and do a presentation or some type of staff development, then you can find us on our website or email or phone, which will also be on the last slide. Quick plug for Tau Connect. It's a website you should take a screenshot of. This is a therapy assisted online. This is not therapy, even though it says therapy assistance. What this is a self-help platform for all students and caregivers, including school staff in Ocean and Monmouth County that we've offered this year. And this is an opportunity for people to create their own wellness platform. They can go on and create their own little internal therapy world that involves webinars and trainings, mindfulness and stress reduction, and helps them, stay connected to some type of wellness 365 days a year, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. It's completely confidential. So it's a great site. It's free for you to use if you stay connected to Compass. So I would say take down that website. It'll give you an opportunity to register, and you can use it for your phone or from your computer. And with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our professional presenters, Corey Hammond, Linda Richter from the Partnership to End Addiction. If it's your first time joining us, you're in for a chock full of information. Corey and Linda are true experts in the field of prevention science, and we're going to be speaking about substances this evening and deep dive into alcohol, vaping, and marijuana. So There is an opportunity to put questions in the chat, but otherwise all participants are muted. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Dave. Just quick intros. Again, I'm Corey Hammond. I'm the Director of Prevention Services at Partnership to End Addiction. I'm joined here by Dr. Linda Richter, who is the Senior VP of Prevention Research and Analysis. And then also on our team is our fabulous research assistant, Olivia Root. And so what we're going to be going over today is substance use in adolescent, just the basic kind of contextualizing it. And then we're going to go through alcohol, nicotine vaping, and marijuana. We're going to go into the prevalence and trends around the use of these substances, background concepts and definitions, why these are concerning. We're going to go into motivations for youth substance use, and then how to safeguard our youth by doing some frequently asked questions that parents and caregivers might have. And if it feels like we're going fast, it's because there's a lot of information that we want to get through, but this will be recorded and we will make sure that we send out the slides afterwards so that you can reference back anything that you might have missed because we're speeding through. So substance use in adolescence, trying to do a quick context here. Adolescence is the critical period for addiction risk. If you came to one of our first webinars, you heard us really hounding on this point. This is a period of intense and transformative brain development. Teens and adolescents take a lot of risks, which is normal and healthy, but it's makes them vulnerable to initiating and experimenting with substances and experiencing the consequences of that. And one of the big consequences that we know of that the research shows is that the earlier someone uses substances, the higher their chance of developing addiction later on. So for those who use substances before the age of 18, there's a 1 in 4 chance of going on to develop an addiction, while if that person waits until they're 21, their chance of developing addiction is much lower, 1 in 25 at that point. And so this is the substances that are popular with youth and past year use. And this is actually just brand new data that came out today, which is kind of exciting. And so these are the things that are most commonly used. We have alcohol, nicotine, and marijuana among 8th, 10th graders and 12th graders. And so you'll see that the purple bar is 12th graders, seniors, the orange bar is 10th graders, and the yellow bar is 8th graders. Things like alcohol use, 46% of 12th graders self-reported having used alcohol in the past year, about 31% of 10th graders, and 15% of 8th graders. Much less than that is kids reporting having been drunk in the past year, with about a quarter of high school seniors reporting that. We know that if high school students are going to drink, it's most likely going to be a flavored alcoholic beverage, thing like a White Claw or a Truly, things like that. And you'll see over a third of seniors report having had a flavored alcoholic beverage in the past year. When it comes to vaping nicotine, 23% of seniors, 18% of 10th graders, and 11% of 8th graders have vaped nicotine in the past year. Similar, but slightly more present among high school seniors is marijuana use. And then finally, having specifically vaped marijuana, only about 6.5% of 8th graders, but almost 20% of seniors have vaped marijuana in the past year. And so we highlight these substances because they're easily available, legal or mostly legal, depending on where someone lives. And they have significant industries that are pushing their use for younger and younger kids. But they're also perceived as, less risky or harmful than some other harder drugs that you can think of. But important context here is that most teens aren't using substances. So this graph shows, it doesn't go all the way to 2023, but it goes till 2018, past month abstaining from substances and lifetime abstaining from substances. And we see that starting, this data starts in the 70s, it's just a continual increase. And most recently, 2023, 70% of 8th graders, 54% of 10th graders and almost 38% of 12th graders were lifetime abstainers, meaning that they had never tried or used any substances whatsoever. And so use of almost all substances decreased dramatically between 2020 and 2021 due to COVID, schools changing and closing, social distancing, moving to e-learning. And then in 2022, most substance use among adolescents kind of held steady at those lower levels. And the most recent data shows that this trend has kind of continued into 2023. So moving into alcohol, it is, one that we're all concerned about because we feel like it is everywhere and we feel like a lot of teens are using it. So here is what prevalence of alcohol use looks like in two different age brackets. The previous graph was 8th, 10th, and 12th graders. This one is on the left, we'll see drinking among those aged 12 to 20. And then on the right, drinking among those aged 18 to 25. And we have these two different age brackets because some surveys are concerned about those who are drinking underage, so those on the left, while others are more interested in that young adult population, so those who are going to college or moving out and living on their own for the first time. And so these numbers will overlap a little bit. But it's important to point out that the norm is that for those underage is that they're not drinking. So we have a tendency to think of alcohol as like an inevitable part of life and something that everyone does, but it's really not the case. And when it comes to the larger population, like, yes, a lot of people will try alcohol. About 85% of the population will have tried alcohol at some point in their life, but a much smaller proportion of that legal adult population, just over half, drinks, regularly, will have reported having a drink in the past month. So not nearly as prevalent as kind of everyone makes it out to be. And this continues as a misconception for young people. In 2023, over 47% of high school seniors said that they had never used alcohol. And 75, almost 76% of 12th graders said that they had not used alcohol in the past month. So though it might feel like it's everywhere, young people are not drinking as frequently as we might think. And talking about drinking like everyone does it keeps that misconception going and normalizes it for youth. So being aware of the true prevalence of drinking can help us move away from this notion that, it's just a rite of passage that everyone does. And so that brings us to a point that we talk about a lot, this idea of delaying use as long as possible. The research shows us that the earlier a person starts drinking, the more likely they are to develop an alcohol use disorder. And so that's what this chart is showing us. People who start drinking before the age of 15 are 5 times more likely to develop an alcohol use disorder than those who begin at 21. So if we can delay until 21, we can really try to keep people safe. Some background concepts and definitions around alcohol. I'm sure everyone has seen this graphic before, this idea of when we're numbering drinks for different measurement purposes, what constitutes a single drink. And so the standard is 12 fluid ounces of a 5% beer, 5 ounces of wine, or 1 shot, so a normal 1.5 ounce of 80 proof spirit. So important to note with this is that not all drinks come in these serving sizes and these alcohol percentages. If someone has a double IPA that's 10% alcohol and 16 ounces, it's going to be a lot more than just one drink. And the White Claws and Trulies, they taste very sweet and they don't taste like alcohol, but they have the same amount of alcohol as most beers. A heavy pour on a wine glass is going to be a lot more than 5 ounces. So it's important for people who drink to know that these are the amounts that count as one and to kind of keep track to monitor their consumption. BAC, blood alcohol concentration. This is probably something that everyone knows as well. It's the percentage of the alcohol in the bloodstream. The more or faster someone drinks, the higher their BAC level. Other things that factor into someone's BAC is the absorption rate based on how much food was in their stomach before they started drinking, just someone's body weight. The smaller the body size, the higher the BAC for the same amount of alcohol. Females will generally have a higher BAC than a biological male will after drinking the same amount, and that's just because of, you know, the amount of water in a female's body compared to a male's, as well as the enzymes in the liver that are used to metabolizing alcohol. They work slightly differently in men and women. And the legal intoxication level for a 21-year-old in most states is 0.08, which I'm sure we know about, which means that someone's blood is 0.08% alcohol by volume. For those who are not of legal drinking age, it's illegal to drive with any measurable blood alcohol concentration. So 0.08 does not mean anything for those who are not of legal age. Underage drinking, those younger than 21 in every state. Important thing to highlight here is that underage youth who drink are about twice as likely as adults to meet the clinical criteria for an alcohol use disorder. So we know that when young people drink, they tend to do so more intensely and consume more in a given time period compared to adults. So frequently with the goal of feeling the effects of getting drunk or having, you know, a wild kind of time. So binge drinking. It's very common. Binge drinking for males is defined as 5 or more drinks in a 2-hour period. And for females, it's 4 or more drinks in a period. And this is important when it comes to youth drinking because 90% of all alcohol consumed by youth occurs in the context of binge drinking. So if a young person is drinking, more often than not, they're going to be in a situation where binge drinking is happening. But kind of on the other side of that, solitary alcohol use. So that is drinking alone, not in a social setting. And so the reason we're concerned about solitary alcohol use or drinking alone is like this social context that drinking alone is strongly associated with riskier drinking. It's more likely that someone's using alcohol as a coping mechanism or as a way to self-medicate because they're not using it, you know, to have fun with others. And those types of motivations are more likely to signal problematic drinking. So 27% of adolescents who drink reported having drank alone in the past year. And there is evidence that females are more negatively affected by this drinking alone phenomenon. And so in trying to prevent kids from drinking, it helps to be aware of how they access alcohol. So even if the majority of kids aren't drinking regularly, 84% of high school seniors say that alcohol is fairly or very easy to get. Common ways of doing this are, you know, taking it from their own home, using fake IDs, which are easier and cheaper to get than you can probably imagine, buying from stores that don't check IDs, asking older people, siblings, peers to purchase it for them, staying overnight with friends who aren't so vigilant, and they can transport clear alcohol in water bottles to try to be more discreet. So why is underage drinking concerning? So academic and social problems. These are obviously common among not just alcohol, but other substances, but we know that when young people are drinking frequently, can lead to school absences, poor academic performance, so it can really hinder their education and their future goals. We know that alcohol-induced mood swings and aggression can damage friendships and lead to physical altercations, and reduced participation in social activities, kind of changing friend groups, can lead to a lot of social isolation among kids. And it interferes with healthy brain development. And so research shows us that alcohol can damage a lot of different structures in the brain, and it can damage the integrity of like the coding on the neurons that allows signals to travel quickly through and between them. And so when all of these different areas of the brain are damaged, it can lead to difficulties with memory, decision-making, impulse control, motivation, and just learning in general. Alcohol can disrupt the functioning of the amygdala, which controls the individual's ability to focus and recognize danger. So kind of normal risk-taking can turn dangerous. Someone's more likely to engage in risky sexual behavior, they're more prone to violence, they're more prone to other substance use, can it can compromise these important academic and social skills. We know that adolescence is a time where the brain's building all of these incredible neuronal connections, and alcohol can be really detrimental in this period. And when it comes to memory, heavy drinking over a short period can cause a blackout where your memory kind of is not working for a long period of time. You're not forming new memories, so you look back and you don't remember what you did for hours at a time. And 1 in 5 adolescents who drink had an alcohol-induced blackout in the past 6 months. Mental health risks. Alcohol is a nervous system depressant, so it slows down brain activity. It makes symptoms of anxiety, depression, and aggression worse. There's a link between alcohol and suicidality. So 21% of all people who die by suicide have a BAC above 0.1, so slightly higher than the legal limit for driving. And just mental health issues occur significantly more frequently among youth who have alcohol use disorder. And we know that the earlier they start using alcohol, the greater that risk for the development of these and subsequent mental health issues. Physical health. Recent evidence shows that any amount of alcohol at any age is not good for your physical health. But young people who drink are generally, they report being sick more often and in generally worse health. That was a study that Linda did. It can suppress puberty-related genes and hormones, delayed puberty, and heavy drinking, we know, can lead to a lot of chronic health problems in adulthood: anemia, cirrhosis, pancreatitis, and it's a major risk factor for many forms of cancer. Acutely, some of the consequences, as many of us probably know, alcohol poisoning, and younger bodies process alcohol differently than adults do. So things like alcohol poisoning are more likely to happen to kids who drink than adults. And it's so important for both parents and kids to know what alcohol poisoning looks like so that they know how and when to get help if someone's in danger. So things like if somebody is having difficulty remaining conscious, if they're feeling very cold, or if they look blue, if their heart rate is very slow, if they're confused and dulled, this could be a sign of alcohol poisoning. And we want to make sure that kids know, just don't have this idea that their friend can sleep it off. This should be a sign to call 911. And accidents, injuries, and fatalities. Alcohol is a main contributor to the leading causes of injuries and death among youth: car crashes, alcohol poisoning, and then other things like falls, burns, drowning, homicide, and suicide. A little bit more on driving. So alcohol, it interferes with your motor skills and your reaction time, which are integral to being able to drive safely. So teens inexperience with both driving and drinking puts them at a significantly higher risk for car crashes than adults are. 1 in 10 high schoolers reported having drank and then drove before. And youth age 16 to 20, so those newest drivers, are more likely to be in a car crash than adults, but they're 17 times more likely to be in a crash if they are intoxicated. So teens might not fully appreciate the severity of the risks and consequences. And so, it's important that they know that this is a leading cause of death among young people. And Linda is going to talk about vaping.
Thank you, Corey. Sorry I can't see you all, but I'm here. I hope you can hear me okay. So I've been on the vaping beat for a long time, since about 2014 when it first hit the market. And I'll toot my own horn saying I was warning everyone then, but there was a lot of backlash because people were very into the idea that it would be a really good alternative to tobacco smoking, which it was to some extent, but it didn't work out very well for younger people who had no interest in smoking. And then all of a sudden, they have a new addiction. So what is vaping? So often, actually, the word vaping is a misnomer, because what's coming out of your mouth and what you're inhaling into your lungs when you use a vaping product is not harmless water vapor. It's actually an aerosol. And we'll talk about what sort of toxic chemicals, et cetera, are in that aerosol that people are breathing in and out. But essentially, it has several components to the device. And this has changed quite a bit over time, as we'll see. But it's battery operated. There's a mouthpiece. There's a cartridge that holds the liquid that contains the ingredients that get vaporized, I guess, and inhaled. You can go to the next slide. So, it has changed quite a bit. So they came on the market originally in 2007, became popular in the United States in like around 2015, and then increased in popularity in the 2010s. They first came out looking like cigarettes because the idea was really to be a replacement to cigarettes and to give the same feel and sort of vibe as a cigarette for people who were smokers, because that was the original intention. But then they morphed over time to look more like vape pens. So they do resemble like pens and those kind of devices. And then there were these versions that were called mods, which could be modified, and they are kind of larger, and they produce more of an aerosol when you vape them, and they can have different flavors put in, and they could be sort of customized to your liking. And then when the peak of popularity hit is when the pod-based versions came out. So those were these very sleek devices, which you're seeing on the right. The most popular version was Juul. They look like USB devices, and in fact, you could charge them in a USB port. And that little black thing on top is the cartridge that contained the vaping e-liquid with all the ingredients. So those are not the most popular anymore. Currently, the most popular device, especially among young people, are what's called disposables. And that's because a lot of rules came out, that laws, et cetera, that banned various versions of those prior products that we just showed you on the other slide, primarily the cartridge or pod-based versions. So there were a lot of regulations that were meant to control the availability and content and ingredients of those. So those became less popular, and what took their place are these disposable devices that come in all sorts of flavors and colors, and they're very innocuous looking and sort of fun and stylish. Very easy to hide as well, because if you're not looking for them, you don't quite realize that this is a vaping device. And these skirt a lot of the regulations that are out there on a national and state level, because they sort of fall within several loopholes in the federal regulations and state regulations. So these are the ones that your kids are seeing all over the place and can access fairly quickly, as you'll see in a minute. And on the slide, you could see some of the common names of the brands, which is just kind of good to tuck away in your mind. It's good to always know what your kids know. This is not a vaping product, but I do want to bring it to your attention because it is increasingly popular among young people. They're called synthetic nicotine oral products. So essentially, they are things you put in your mouth. They could be gums, lozenges, like candies, gummies, tablets. You suck on them, and they have very high doses of nicotine. The way they get through the loopholes of the regulations and are able to put claims all over their packaging saying that they are tobacco-free is because they are derived from synthetic nicotine made in a lab, as opposed to from the tobacco plant, which is where all the regulations lie. So essentially, they have synthesized nicotine in a lab. It has very high doses of nicotine with the exact same effects of nicotine. And these are things that your kid could be chewing gum or sucking on a candy. And unless you're familiar with the brands, it's very hard to know that these are high dose nicotine products. And all that is to really show you that cigarettes are clearly awful and the worst. And I don't even want to play that comparison game, because I think it's, the analogy I often give is like, would you rather, something fall out of a 57th floor of a building or a 54th floor of a building? Like, it's awful either way, right? So yeah, in many cases, smoking is clearly worse. But what has happened with the vaping industry is it's really become quite alarming. And what this slide is showing you is sort of the evolution, or I would say the devolution of, how much nicotine is in the products that our kids are exposed to. So you have a cigarette where one pack of cigarettes was about 20 milligrams of inhaled nicotine. contains about 20 cigarettes. And then you could see on the slide how that has just increased over time. So we had the Juul pod, which were really popular in the late 20 teens and early 2020s with kids. And then now we have these disposable vapes that, you know, this number is even on the lower end of what's available. Actually, it just keeps going up and up and up. And again, these are kind of bypassing regulations, speeding ahead of what the government can do to keep these under control. And these are widely available. So that's all scary, but now let's talk about actual prevalence and trends. So you have like a realistic sense of just how many kids are doing this and how worried you should be about it. So as you could see, it was in about 2019 that the rates of use among middle and high school students peaked, and they have declined since. If you look at the high school side, it's pretty encouraging. It's really going down pretty steadily. There was one blip in 2022, but we're back to 10% now in 2023, which is quite encouraging. It's the middle school numbers that are a little scary, even though they're a lot lower, because what we're seeing are steady increases since 2021, which is post-pandemic. And this is our pandemic. I know we're in the pandemic, but, you know, after the 2020 lockdown year, when if you look across all substances, rates really went down and continue to stay low. But this is an exception. We're starting to see a creep up among middle school students. There's a couple hypotheses about this, and one that makes a lot of sense is that the kids who are now in middle school didn't live or weren't as aware of all that was going on pre-pandemic when it came to vaping. A lot of the high school students sort of saw it happen. They saw their friends getting addicted. They saw, you know, they were privy to all the prevention messaging and all the alarm around it. And so they were able to, you know, kind of get the message. Oh, here I am. They were able to get the message that it wasn't a good thing to do. And so that might have stayed with that cohort of students, whereas the middle school students sort of missed that. And they are now being bombarded with a lot of these very cool looking devices that are very easy to use and easy to access, and they are high in nicotine. And just, if you could just go back for 1 second, Corey, I just want to take note of that little box on the right. The intended market of vaping devices is adults. You know, any vaping company will say they have no intention for young people to use it. But as you could see, the average percentage of adults who use them, at least this was back in 2021, was about 4.5%, which is far lower than high school rates and pretty close to what the middle school students are using. And what's concerning is that even though the numbers are not that high, among the kids who are vaping, it's pretty common, again, not the norm, but it is more common for them to be using vaping devices frequently or daily, which is, you know, more than 20 days in a month or even every day. This is recent data that came out from the National Youth Tobacco Survey from the CDC. And what's important to note here are some of the popular brands, as you could see in the middle. And also, as Corey mentioned earlier with alcohol, how kids prefer flavored alcohol. Well, that's the same is true of e-cigarettes, which is the formal name of vaping products. And the vast majority of young people who vape prefer flavored vaping products. This is recent data from actually today that shows how accessible kids believe it is to, you know, to get a vaping device. And obviously, as you could see, the numbers go up as kids get a little bit older, but it's really quite, you know, perceived to be quite accessible once a kid hits high school, their senior year. And, you know, the perceived risk of using it occasionally is fairly low and consistent across the grades, and a little higher and somewhat consistent across the grades as well if kids are using it regularly. There's different ways that young people report accessing vaping products. These data are from 2020, but friends are the main one, whether you're in middle school or high school. Sort of vape shops and convenience stores where you kind of go in and get it. That's more popular, obviously, among older students. Interestingly, family is higher. That's the orange bar for middle school students, and that is likely because kids are getting it from older siblings. But we don't know exactly the source, but this is just some sense of where these are coming from. And this is from 2021 data. Students asked, you know, why do they do it? And again, those the friends are a culprit. We see that that's the most popular answer, that their friends are using them, so they get interested. Curiosity. About a quarter report doing so to ease symptoms of anxiety or depression or stress. And that's a real concern. And as we're going to talk about a little bit more, people using any kind of substance to sort of self-medicate mental health problems is really a concerning trend. And it's more concerning than kids who are just using it to try or because they're curious. And I would just say that there's a lot of research that has come out in recent years that despite young people's feelings that if they vape, it's going to ease those symptoms, the reverse is actually true. Nicotine is a stimulant and it actually makes those symptoms worse instead of better. So I have kind of already said why we should be concerned, but let's get a little more detail about it. So in the first few years when vaping products came out, the notion was, well, it's just nicotine. It's not the tobacco. It doesn't come with all the tar and the smoke and all that bad stuff, which is very true. But the extent to which nicotine was underplayed as a risky substance for young people was really tremendous, or actually for anybody. Nicotine is a very highly addictive drug. It affects the brain very quickly. And it is extremely addictive. Addiction sets in really, really quickly for nicotine. And it also, in the developing brain of young people, produces structural and functional changes that have profound effects on a young person. It affects their attention, learning, mood, impulse control, all those things we really care about that can influence kids' academic success and social functioning, and just mental health and interpersonal relationships. On a physical level, nicotine increases blood pressure and respiration and heart rate, which if used to, in very large doses, there have been cases where kids have had real severe problems from that. And in the longer term, it does harm your nervous, cardiovascular, respiratory, and reproductive systems. We also know that there are differences between the effects on teens versus adults of nicotine, where the teen brain reacts differently and the effects are more intense and long-lasting than they are for adults. Although cigarette smoke, as we know, contains over 7,000 chemicals, awful cancer-causing compounds and toxins, the chemicals that are in most vaping products are far from innocuous. Most of them have flavoring chemicals in them that have many, many kinds of toxins in them. We've seen DNA damage in the cells around the mouth, especially from flavored products. The chemicals have been linked to lung damage, cardiovascular problems, immunological functioning problems, and that's not just the nicotine. These are the chemicals that make up the e-liquid ingredients. And there are metals that appear in the device and also in the e-liquids, a whole range of metals that are actually carcinogens as well. The other concern we have is that despite the promotion of vaping as a way to reduce smoking, we have seen that especially for adolescents, when they vape, even if they've never smoked before or had no intention of doing so, they are at least a 4-fold increased risk of starting to smoke later on. And that risk is even higher for the younger teens. Nicotine addiction is a serious issue, and it is affecting a lot of young people who vape. Because of the very high nicotine content, many people who vape can't stop. And the symptoms could be intense withdrawal symptoms, not just cravings, but also fatigue, serious irritability, difficulty concentrating, sort of the opposite of all the, short-term positive effects of, let's say, using nicotine. So people might use nicotine to concentrate over time. And this is true of any substance. When you develop an addiction, the effects become the opposite of those initial benefits. We know that among youth, we're finding that more and more kids who vape are reporting needing to use their first tobacco product, whether it's a vape or whatever else they're using, within 5 minutes of waking up, which is a classic symptom of addiction. And that's true even more so than those who use cigarettes or other tobacco products combined. And as I said earlier, nicotine exposure alters the brain, increases vulnerability to using other substances. There are a lot of studies now that show that kids who vape and never use marijuana, for example, are now at increased risk of marijuana use. And then also substances like cocaine, because nicotine is a stimulant, as is cocaine, and your brain gets primed for sort of desiring a stimulant like that. You may have heard of popcorn lung. This was a problem really earlier on in the vaping epidemic, where a lot of the chemicals that were in those earlier products really did produce horrendously awful effects on the lung. And this was like a very specific syndrome. People got very nervous about this. So the main ingredient that caused this have been removed from most vaping products, although there's so many illegal products on the market that they may still be there. The bigger point to take away is that it really does have detrimental effects on the lungs and on respiratory functioning. Okay, there you go.
Great. Okay, so on to marijuana. We're going to start with some concepts and definitions. What is marijuana? I feel like I don't need to go into too far in depth here, but it is the gray or green mixture of dried, shredded flowers and leaves that come from the hemp plant. So the Cannabis sativa plant, which is why you'll also kind of hear interchangeably marijuana and cannabis used. The main active chemical is THC. That's the psychoactive agent of marijuana, the one that affects the brain the most. You'll also hear about CBD, which is one of those cannabinoids, those chemical agents in marijuana, but it's not psychoactive, so it doesn't produce a high in the way that THC does. Marijuana can be extracted into oils and waxes and in a wide array of edible products. And of those cannabinoids that I'm talking about, there's over 100 different ones of them. And there's some that are becoming increasingly popular that are in very small amounts in the plant, but then are taken out and synthesized and kind of concentrated down into much higher amounts. And so if you see things advertised as being Delta 8 or Delta 10, these are these products with kind of artificially synthesized cannabinoids. And so Delta 8 is the most common one that you hear about now. In that recent data that we saw, 11.5% of high school seniors reported having used a Delta 8 product in the past year. And so Delta 8 can be just kind of like any other marijuana product. It can be smoked, it can be vaped, it can be put into oils and waxes and become edible. And so it has similar psychoactive and intoxicating effects to, Delta 9, which is regular THC. So all these new products have synthesized synthetic cannabinoids, like to greater concentrations. And that process of increasing the concentration has potentially the creation of harmful chemicals and byproducts. And so the FDA has put out a warning against the potential risks of Delta 8 products because it is so unregulated. And Delta 10 is similar. It's a cannabinoid that's present in very small amounts in the plant, but then can be synthesized into larger concentrations for these new products. And there's even less research into Delta 8 and those effects. And so the different ways that marijuana can be used, smoking is always going to be the most common. There's a lot of different ways now, but a joint is marijuana rolled in paper, blunts, bongs, bubblers, hookah pipes. These are all making up kind of this most common way of using. But now we know that there's a lot of marijuana vaping going around. So those are kind of they will look very similar to a nicotine vape. They'll have a liquid in a cartridge that contains THC, but vaping products tend to have a much higher concentration of THC than smoked marijuana. So the effects can be a lot stronger. And that kind of aerosol produced when vaping liquid is inhaled contains all of those other flavorings and chemicals that we know to be highly toxic. There's also dabbing, which is a waxy concentrate of marijuana that's then put in a glass pipe or a bong and heated up. It is much more concentrated than the usual plant itself. It can have as much as 90% THC concentration, while smoked marijuana has about 15%. Dried cannabis or oils can be put into foods. And so the effects of ingesting marijuana this way is a lot stronger than just having smoked it. And it takes a lot longer to feel the effects, which is where this is kind of dangerous because, the telltale story where someone takes what they assume to be their usual dose of an edible, they wait an hour, they don't feel any effects, they think, okay, I should take more. So then they take more. finally, like 2 hours later, the effects kick in and they're way more intoxicated than they had ever intended. And so then we can see a lot of those negative consequences of getting way too high. Synthetic cannabinoids, these are things like spice and K2, if you've heard of those, which are not marijuana at all. These are just kind of dried, regular, non-psychoactive plant matter that has been sprayed with man-made psychoactive chemicals. And so because of that, these lead to unpredictable and potentially severe effects because we don't often know what's in them. Can include extreme anxiety, paranoia, hallucinations, rapid heart rate, vomiting, violent behavior, and suicidal thoughts. Prevalence and trends. So this is, again, that new data on rates of youth of marijuana. So about 36% of high school seniors report having ever used marijuana in their life. 22.5% of 10th graders and 11.5% of 8th graders. But then if we look at past month use, that goes down quite a bit. So, only about less than 5% of 8th graders have used marijuana in the past month. Then we also wanted to look at past month vaping of marijuana. So you'll see that 18% of high school seniors used marijuana in the past month, and almost 14% of them vaped marijuana in the past month. So we know that a good amount of the marijuana smoking that's going on in the past month is coming from vaping devices. Again, perceptions of accessibility and risk, similar to what we were just looking at for nicotine vaping devices. 12th graders, seniors, 72% of them say that marijuana would be fairly easy or very easy to get. About a quarter of 8th graders think that. And then as looking at whether they see great risk in using marijuana once or twice, occasionally and regularly, you'll see that over half of 8th graders see that great risk in using marijuana regularly, but only about a third of 12th graders do. And so this graph shows that the marijuana used today is not the same as marijuana used in the past. The strength and potency of marijuana has really increased over the past 25 years, nearly quadrupling. Higher concentration of THC is linked to a lot of things, a lot of more ER visits where marijuana was a factor, and higher likelihood of developing psychosis, anxiety disorders, and other problems. Another trend that we're all aware of, I'm sure, is the legalization of marijuana. So as of last month, 24 states, 2 territories, and DC have regulated marijuana for non-medical adult use. So all of the green states are those that marijuana is legalized for adult use. The yellow states are those that have just medical marijuana programs. So we know that this is becoming more and more common across the country. And legalizing marijuana may send a message to young people that the drug is safe and acceptable to use. And we know that if kids don't believe marijuana to be harmful, they're more likely to use it. So why is youth marijuana use concerning? Short-term effects of marijuana is that altered perception of sights and sounds, time and touch, that feeling of being high, increased appetite, difficulty thinking and problem solving, disrupted learning and memory, poor coordination, increased heart rate, and then we know anxiety and paranoia is a big and serious one. Long-term effects with smoking and vaping of it, chronic cough, bronchitis, worsening asthma symptoms, can impair their work life, athletic performance, leads to kind of a sense of all-over apathy, mental health problems. For those who are susceptible, it increases the risk of schizophrenia and other psychoses. There's research that shows that marijuana use contributes to fertility and other reproductive problems, and we know that it puts the user at risk for other substance use and addiction. And then there's unpredictable effects. The effects of marijuana vary greatly between people. It's hard to predict the reaction that an individual could have. One teenager might have a totally safe, kind of chill, normal experience smoking weed. Their peer might have smoked the exact same amount and might have had a very different time that was full of anxiety, paranoia, nausea, all types of things. It produces effects similar to a depressant, stimulant, or a hallucinogen, all depending on the dose of the THC and the individual person who's taking it. And these effects can be amplified and more dangerous when a person combines marijuana with other substances. That idea of like being cross-faded, being high on marijuana and drunk on alcohol at the same time, can be very dangerous. CHS is marijuana-induced uncontrolled vomiting and abdominal pain. And this is something that can occur in phases which can last weeks. This is something that requires medical attention. And most of the patients that come in with CHS report daily cannabis use. You may also have heard of e-cigarette or vaping use associated lung injury. This was reported frequently back in 2020 and then kind of teetered off after that because of COVID. They stopped tracking it, but this was related mostly to unregulated marijuana vapes that had this additive called vitamin E acetate, which is added as a cutting agent, was linked to most cases of this, but not all. And the symptoms of this were shortness of breath, weight loss, fatigue, GI problems, and potentially lung failure. Marijuana impaired driving, we hear a lot about drunk driving, but it is, also very unsafe to drive while under the influence of marijuana. Like alcohol, it causes disorientation, impairment of judgment, and general motor skills. Number of drivers found to have marijuana in their system now surpasses those who have alcohol in their system. So different than kind of what it used to be. And marijuana use disorder. For a long time, common misconception that people can't be addicted to marijuana. Those who use it chronically and intensely can develop both a physical tolerance where they need to use more and more of it to get the same effect, and a psychological dependence. So you can have withdrawal symptoms, sleep disturbance, nausea, irritability, and restlessness when you try to stop using. And again, same thing with alcohol. We talk about delay, delay, delay. People who start using marijuana before age 18 are 4 to 7 times more likely to develop a marijuana use disorder than those who started using in adulthood. So we want to delay that use as long as possible. Motivations for youth substance use. So there's many reasons why youth would be motivated to use substances. Obviously, they are dangerous and have long-lasting effects, so we would hope that that would matter, but there are valid reasons why kids would try these things. In the larger environmental society, there's the glorification and normalization of use in media. Alcohol use is pervasive in American culture. It's a part of celebrations, sporting events, concerts. Smoking cigarettes and marijuana is common in a lot of movies. Kids will see their favorite celebrities smoking in Instagram pictures, That's the unregulated messaging on social media. There's inadequate and unenforced policies. Linda talking about all of these vapes that are kind of skirting regulation, and the stores that are selling them are not being cracked down on. Youth targeted marketing, things like White Claws, Trulies, hard seltzers that are sweet and come in these packaging that looks very exciting and enticing. Same with these vapes that are made to taste like candy or dessert. All of these things appeal to kids. And big industry, these, big tobacco, alcohol companies, and now kind of the legal marijuana, it's motivated to recruit a long-time consumer base. So they want to get people hooked early because then, over the lifespan, that's a lot more money coming in for them. Family and interpersonal factors, parents modeling, drinking in the home. Social pressure, a lot of teens base their social identities on their peers, making them susceptible to influence. Misinformation from peers, kind of this misconception that alcohol is going to make them more confident and relieve their symptoms of social anxiety, or that if they smoke weed, they'll be less stressed. The availability of medical marijuana and legalization contributes to that perception that marijuana is harmless. Family instability or stress, and then finally social isolation and loneliness. And then importantly, talking about mental health, if a child is struggling with negative emotions or wanting to ease the symptoms of a mental health disorder, they might self-medicate with nicotine, alcohol, and marijuana. So self-medicating, we mean attempting to deal with mental health issues, pain, or intense emotions by using drugs to kind of fix that. It's this bi-directional relationship that if a child has a mental health disorder and self-medicates, they can very quickly start to rely on that to alleviate their symptoms and develop an addiction, but then vice versa, using a substance can trigger or exacerbate a pre-existing mental health condition. So safeguarding youth, we have some quick, frequently asked questions that I want to go through for how we can keep our kids safe and some common misconceptions that parents might have. These are our 10 key protective parenting strategies. I'm sure you've seen all these before, and when you get these slides, you can go through and rate all of these. But some commonly asked questions. So parents might say, is it even possible to prevent my kid from drinking or using marijuana? Or is it inevitable? And we know it's not inevitable. As we've said throughout this presentation, most kids don't drink or use marijuana. So a parent really can help prevent substance use. The majority of teens say that their parents are the most important influence on their decision about whether or not to use substances. Another one, and this is a common one, isn't it better for parents to teach children how to drink responsibly by allowing them to drink at home under my supervision? And so this is a great question. And, some parents earnestly believe that allowing a child to drink under their supervision will protect them from overdoing it and can keep them safe. But research shows that drinking at home with parental approval is associated with higher risk drinking, higher alcohol use, and alcohol problems later in life. So allowing kids to drink in the home sends mixed messages about the safety of underage alcohol use. And, doing so, even if it's just for special occasions, that makes it seem like even more of a highly appealing treat. And then in talking about whether or not it's okay to let kids drink in your home, it's important to understand social host laws. So specifically to New Jersey has strict social host laws, where if you are throwing a party and you either serve alcohol to a person of legal age that is already very intoxicated, or if you serve alcohol to a minor, someone who is younger than 21, you can be criminally and civilly responsible for what they do, any damages, any injuries or property damage that they may cause while intoxicated. And so it is very important for parents to be vigilant about the young people that are in their home. Just, if anything, protect yourself from being sued. Another one, addiction doesn't run in my family. Do I really need to worry about my children drinking or smoking every now and then? And so addiction is, not the only thing that you need to be worried about, but there is a genetic component to addiction that you should be aware of. But there's a lot of other things that count too, things like mental health problems, behavior or impulse control problems, trauma, easy availability of substances and the opportunities to use them, having peers who use and starting to use at an early age are all things that are worrying more so than just family history. And, there's other long-term and irrevocable harms of behaviors associated with substance use, not just the fact that they may become addicted later in life, but the idea that they could get in a motor vehicle crash, they could post something embarrassing or hurtful on social media, they could engage in unsafe sex behaviors or aggressive behaviors or just doing dumb things while intoxicated. There's a lot of issues. And we just have, I think, 2 left. So I know we're slightly over time, but we're sneaking up on it. I don't want my children to drink or vape, but I worry that not allowing them to will interfere with their ability to make friends and socialize. And this is totally understandable. It's understandable to want your child to be able to make friends and socialize, offering to host activities where they can do other types of safe things can help. But some parents allow their kids to go to parties where alcohol is available, but ask them not to drink and teach them how to do that. So you can have a conversation and discuss the techniques to avoid drinking or vaping. without attracting scorn or mocking from their peers who are using. So you can collaboratively come up with the words that will work. If someone is going to be in situations where alcohol might be present, important for you and your child to know about the Good Samaritan laws. New Jersey has a Good Samaritan law. If a youth who is drinking, they will not get in trouble for calling 911 to help an intoxicated friend. And so the purpose of this is to kind of grant someone immunity for getting help in a dangerous situation, even if something illegal has been going on. So the priority is health and safety, kind of regardless of legal consequences. We just don't want kids to hesitate in an emergency situation because they're afraid of getting into trouble. And then finally, is it hypocritical of me to tell my kid not to drink or smoke when they know that I did at their age? And this is also a very good one, but you know, as a parent, you want to do all you can to protect your child. Many of us didn't wear helmets for sports or other dangerous activities in our youth, but now we know that that's important for protecting the brain. Kind of the same thing is true of alcohol, vaping, and marijuana. We know so much more about protecting our kids against the effects of these substances than ever before. And again, it's not about your past and what you did in the past, it's about their future and being safe. And I can speed through our resources. We have guides for families on our website, drugfree.org, substance-specific ones. If you want more info on alcohol, marijuana, or vaping, we have guides for those. We have playbooks for parents, preteens, and teens. We have support and resources, trainings, text messaging programs, online support groups. We have a substance use risk assessment tool that's also available in Spanish that can just kind of show you how worried you might want to be based on risk factors. And we have LGBTQ+ specific resources for parents of those individuals. And here's our contact information. If you have any questions, I know we don't have a ton of time for questions, but Linda and I can stay on for a little bit more if there are any, but you can certainly email us at any time. You can go to drugfree.org to find more resources, but that's all we have for you today. If anyone has any questions that they want to ask, by all means. And Dave, I realized I didn't have your, I didn't add in the final contact info for Compass at the end, but if you have your link that you want to maybe pop in the chat, definitely feel free to do that.
No worries. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate it as always. This is great information. Hopefully everybody learns something. I always do. For those on the call, know that we're working hard to get these webinars translated into Spanish for our Spanish population. And when they are available, we will send them out to share with your contact. There is a feature that I believe you used last month, a translation feature. So we're also going to be able to show you how to use that a little bit next time. But this webinar will be available on our website, as are the other two that have already occurred. That is www.preferredbehavioral.org/NJ4S Compass. And you go down to the events page and you will see the archived webinars. And we will also be able to send out the slides and the recording after today. So we appreciate your time. I guess Linda and Corey can hang out and answer some questions. If you need to reach us directly at Compass, please do so utilizing the website, or you can always, I'm sure most of you have reached out to the office by now, and if you haven't, feel free to do so. Email me, it's SVERT at preferredbehavioral.org. So very great night. We appreciate everybody's time and attention. Thank you for showing up. We're looking forward to our next webinar series next month in January, which is actually going to be, I believe, a two-part series. This will be the second part of this series, right, Corey? I believe the second part of Substance Use Deep Dive, which will be on Wednesday, January 24th at 6:30 p.m. So good to see everybody again. Have a great night. Safe and happy holidays.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks so much.
Welcome.